Alright, savages, welcome along to Sceam Me Up Botty. I'm your host, Rodney Stewart. We're going to chat a little bit more about Star Trek, the original series, with the episode The City on the Edge of Forever, which is episode 28 of season 1. This episode is actually fantastic, and if you've never seen The City on the Edge of Forever, I would recommend you don't listen to this podcast, because I'm going to destroy it for you. I'm just going to tell you not everything that happens in it. I'm just going to give you my thoughts on the plot and everything. And yeah, if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend you getting off this podcast now, going and watching the episode itself, and if you want, come back after that there. So in this episode, we do have a great story, and yes, one of these time travel episodes where it's always good in Star Trek whenever you get a time travel episode. Absolutely fantastic. We've got Joan Collins in here as a guest star. The plot of the episode is this planet has these weird time distortions coming from it, and the Enterprise is getting rocked by it every time one of these hits the Enterprise. She's getting jolted around, a lot of stuff going on. They're trying to track where all these are at. One of them blows out the panel in front of Sulu, knocking him unconscious, and Dr. McCoy injects him with a few drops of a drug called cortisone. Kirk is a little bit worried about this whenever McCoy goes to do it, because it's a dangerous drug essentially, but it works. Sulu wakes up out of whatever's having them, and he's grand, and McCoy's kind of jokingly with Kirk, the only way that McCoy can, you're going to give me medical advice, yeah? As they're trying to track where the last time distortions are at, the Enterprise gets another jolt at this stage. McCoy falls forward and accidentally injects himself with everything that he has with the cortisone, like 100-time dose of what he had gave Sulu, and it drives him mad, goes crazy, paranoid, and he thinks people's trying to kill him and this sort of thing. He actually flees a bridge and winds up beaming himself down to the planet. Kirk follows him with a search party. Mr. Spock's there with Scotty, goes down to Lieutenant Uhura and a couple of other random red jumpers. Well, they're safe enough in this episode for a change. On the planet's surface, they come across this glowing ring. Turns out to be a sentient object called the Guardian of Forever. One of those parts of the series that just stands out in your mind, and used again later in Star Trek Discovery, I believe, but we'll get to that in due course. This thing is capable of sending them to any time and place, and the Guardian offers to send them back to Earth's past, and it starts to play these images inside the circle of historical times through Earth's history. Like you start to see like ancient Rome, all this sort of stuff playing back to back inside this thing. Spock starts his tricorder for research purposes. While they're distracted, McCoy manages to jump through the portal, and he's still crazed. They have found him, and they think they've, Spock takes him down with the Vulcan nerve pitch, which usually takes people down, but because of the strength of this mad drug in McCoy's system, it doesn't seem to work the way that it would usually work. So he manages to get up, run through this time portal, and vanishes. Just at that, they lose contact with the Enterprise. They don't know what's going on until the Guardian tells them that McCoy has altered the past to such an extent that the Enterprise and the reality that they knew no longer exists. So whatever happened, Starfleet didn't happen. There was no Starship Enterprise, and everything that they know doesn't exist anymore. Now, it doesn't say it in the episode, and these days, if you were to create this episode now, there'd be some person there to tell you that, because of our proximity to the time portal, we are protected from the effects of everything that happened. You seen that in Star Trek First Contact, whenever the Borg jumped back in time, the Enterprise got caught in the wake, the temporal wake of the portal they went through, protecting them from the changes in the timeline. You don't get this in this episode because, for me, and if anybody gets insulted by this, fair play, but viewers these days, they can't follow the gaps in anything. Star Trek, particularly Series 1 here, there's a lot of stuff goes on in Season 1 of Star Trek, the original series, where you don't always get an answer to everything. It's kind of left to the viewer to fill in some of the spaces. And this is a perfect example of that. They're not told that their proximity to the time portal protected them from the changes in the timeline. You just assume that's what it is. But, as I say, modern audiences these days are flipping clueless at times. The Guardian then does tell them that it's possible to fix the damage, so Kirk requests that it replay the historical periods again, and at the right time they're going to jump in and try and stop McCoy from changing the past. He and Spock attempt to jump through at the point in time just before McCoy's arrival to find themselves in New York City in 1930 during the Great Depression. They steal clothes from a fire escape to blend in, and a policeman catches them. So there's a little bit of comedy here with them trying to explain themselves out of what's happening, and Spock's appearance and whatnot. They're trying to make up these stories about what happened to them. A little bit of comedy in here, very good. They manage to get away from the policeman after the Vulcan neck pinch gets used again, and they hide in a basement, which turns out to be the 21st Street mission. There they meet the soup kitchen's operator, Edith Keeler, and she senses something odd about the two intruders, but offers to pay them to clean up the basement. She's one of these characters that wants to help people, so Kirk's honest with her. They try to bluff their way out of it, but she's too smart for that. So Kirk tells them exactly what happened. They'd stolen the clothes they're currently wearing. They've got no money. They were getting chased by a policeman. They had down there. So she puts them to work, essentially, and tries to help them out. Clean up the basement and finds them a place to stay. Later, Spock attempts to discover how McCoy changed history by accessing the recordings on his tricorder. That's a difficult task using the available technology of 1930, of course, which Spock likens to stone knives and bear skins at one point. Spock works on engineering the problem. Kirk pays their expenses by doing odd jobs at the mission and ends up falling in love with Edith Keeler. And this goes on for a few weeks or so throughout the episode. Unknown to Kirk and Spock, McCoy finally arrives, still in this highly agitated state, and he manages at one point to stumble into the mission where they're at. Now, there's a lot of stuff that goes on for McCoy in this episode. I'm not going to go into any of that there. I'm just going to cover some of the little details of the episode here. As I said at the beginning of the podcast episode, if you've never seen this episode of Star Trek, I would highly recommend. If you're still here at this point listening to this podcast, you haven't seen the episode yet, shame on you, because I'm not going to do it the justice the episode does for itself. It is great. And something that jumped out to me close to the end of the episode, I don't need to watch it again. It's been quite a while since I've actually watched this episode properly. But yeah, we'll get to that in a second. McCoy shows up. Keeler manages to nurse him back to health, and by the end of the episode, he's grand. He survived whatever this drug was doing to him. Spock completes his work, and he discovers that Keeler was supposed to die in a traffic collision, but was somehow saved by the arrival of McCoy, which created an alternate timeline in which he founded a pacifist movement on the eve of World War II, which grew powerful enough that stopped the United States entering the war. So because they didn't go into the war whenever they were supposed to, this allowed Nazi Germany time to develop the first atomic bomb and use that to win the war instead of the Allies. And then they ended up conquering the world. So a lot of good stuff in this episode, has to be said. Kirk is absolutely shaken by this revelation, and he admits to Spock that he's fallen in love with Edith Keeler. And Spock, being Spock, tells him, look, Edith Keeler has to die in order to prevent millions of deaths and restore the future. Heading up towards the end of the episode, skipping and jumping all over the place here again. If you haven't watched the episode, shame on you for being here. Like, I don't want you to listen to this podcast. If you haven't seen it, go check out the episode itself. Kirk and Edith, they're out walking. She's talking about going to this Clark Gable movie, and Keeler casually mentions McCoy's name. Shocked, Kirk tells Keeler to stay right there while he crosses back across the street. She said he's in the mission. Kirk didn't know he was in there, so they've crossed the road from the mission. When he finds out McCoy's there, tells her to stay on one side of the street, goes across. McCoy emerges from the mission. At the same time, Kirk gets to the door. Spock's there. The three reunite on the sidewalk. Observing this, Keeler decides to come across the street to join them and does not notice an oncoming truck. Kirk instinctively turns to save her, but a shout from Spock freezes him in his tracks, and Kirk reluctantly grabs McCoy so he can't save her either. She's then struck and killed by the truck, and a stunned McCoy asks Kirk if he knows what he just did. Kirk doesn't answer him. He just kind of has his heart broken at this point and kind of leans against a wall. Spock's the one that replies, he knows, Doctor, he knows. So back in the present day, Kirk, Spock and McCoy return through the Guardian, rejoin the landing party, where they find the Enterprise and their timeline has been restored. Before they trans back to the ship, a grim-looking Kirk ignores questions about what happened and replies simply, let's get the hell out of here. They beam out and the episode finishes. Now for me, as I said, there's things in Star Trek where the storytelling will not just explain everything to you and leave a little bit to your own interpretation. Love that sort of storytelling. But for me, in that final moment where Edith is killed, Kirk and her cross the street, and for a second a car speeds up towards them and kind of skids to a stop whenever they're crossing the street. And for me, I'm thinking to myself, okay, was that the moment? Because there's a part in the episode where she almost falls down a flight of stairs. They haven't worked out what killed her at this point, but Spock knows that she has to die for the future they know to exist. And he does say to Kirk grabs her before she falls down the stairs. And Spock is like, that could have been the moment. I have to point out to you, that could have been the moment there where she should have died. And so at the end of the episode, where Kirk and her walk out onto the street, and this car kind of doesn't really skid to a halt, but flies up, and there's a little moment there where it's like, just like, fucking use the Green Cross code, guys. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, was that the moment? And Kirk stopped her from getting hit by the car. Now, McCoy's not out there at that point. We do know McCoy changes the past. So, for me, the way the original timeline would have played out would have been she's crossing the street, gets hit by a car. And that might have been the moment there. But when they get to the other side of the street, Kirk discovers McCoy's in the mission. He tells her to stop. He crosses back over the street and meets McCoy. And then she walks across the street and gets hit that time. Did Kirk, and those two moments, did he actually save her from the one that was meant to kill her? Or did he inadvertently create a second one that did kill her? Sort of a thing. You you get my meaning. I did watch the episode yourself. Like, I might be talking out my ass here, but that's sort of something that just skipped into my head there. As I say, I haven't watched the episode in a while. But if that's the case, then it's even more devastating for Kirk, because he's fallen in love with Edith Keeler, because he inadvertently saves her, but then causes the accident that does kill her whenever she's coming back across the street to meet the three of them. Just something to think about. But it is what it is. Fantastic episode. There's a hell of a lot of stuff online written about it here. It's apparently a very, very hard episode to get in place. Went over budget by a hell of a lot of money, but paid off in the long run. Definitely one of the better episodes of the series. If there's anything here that tells us about it. Where are we at? I'll look and see if I can find any receptions for it. It was first broadcast April 6th, 1969 on the NBC. Let me see. Written Nelson ratings. 12 city overnight. Trend X report compiled by Nelson ratings showed that during the first half hour it held second place in the ratings behind Bewitched on the ABC with 11.64 million viewers, compared to Bewitched 15.4 million. The episode beat My Three Sons and CBS during the second half hour. It remained in second place with 28.4% of the audience, behind 32.1% for Love on the Rooftop. Where are we at here? I'm trying to see critical response. Alright, Zach Hanlon of the AV Club gave the episode an A rating in 2009, describing it as a justly revered classic. But he said that McCoy's accidental overdose was a stretch and gave the episode a surprisingly awkward start, with little indication of the greatness that was to follow. He called the ending brutal and praised the conundrum that Kirk was placed in, faced with the death of Keeler. Hanlon suggests it would have made a better final episode of the season instead of Operation Annihilate. Perhaps so. In 2009 it was reviewed by Tori Atkinson and Eugene Myers of Tor.com, where they gave it a rating of 6 out of 6. They were concerned that the episode might not live up to the memory when they rewatched it, but said it remains an incredible episode, often imitated but rarely surpassed in science fiction and any medium. They said that both the tragic and comic moments helped to balance the episode, and said that the end was abrupt and fitting because of the change in Kirk, despite the Guardian's announcement that all is as it was before. It's like, Kirk gets back to the present day, realises their mission was a success, they've restored the timeline, but at what cost? So he should be celebrating, but a woman that he'd fallen in love with, he had let die for the episode. There's a lot more stuff in here, but it's a lot of the same stuff. Like people saying, brilliant story, beautiful story, excellent. It's a time travel episode done well. Fantastic. I could sit here, read reviews for the next 2 hours, but it's all going to be the same sort of thing. It's like a lot of people like this episode. A lot of the critics seem to like it. AV Club called it top 10 must-see episode in 2012. There you are. Another one, Newsweek 2016 named one of the 25 essential episodes of the franchise. I think it was them. There's another one. Business Insider ranked The City in the Age of Forever the second best episode of the original series, as did Pop Matters at one point or another. won awards. Great episode. Yeah, so again, if you've listened to this entire podcast and haven't checked out the episode, shame on you. Go watch that first and then come back and listen to my drivel. Right, that's going to do it for this episode, guys. Stay safe and I will talk to you in the next one. This has been a production of Coins Age Media. Thank you so much for listening.